Welcome everyone to our first spiritual growth campaign of 2026. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bron, and I am the senior pastor here at the Chapel Collective with my husband Daz. And it's so great to be with you all in this way. Tamworth, this is your first time of not having the preacher live in the room while everyone else is watching on screen. So this is how everyone's been experiencing it all this time. It's great to be with you. Narrabri, Gunnedah, Guyra, Armidale, Bendemeer, Tamworth, Wallsend and Port Macquarie. So great to be with you. We have 4 spiritual growth campaigns every year. In term 1, this is the rhythm. In term 1, we do what we call practicing the way. It's a study put together by a man called John Mark Comer. And what it looks at is the ways of Jesus and what it means for us to follow Jesus in his way, not our way, his way. And that's the first one that we do every year. Second term, we do a book of the Bible. We go through a book of the Bible together. Third term, we do a topical series together, usually about 3 weeks, often on relationships because it's spring and love is in the air everywhere we look around. And then in fourth term, we generally have maybe something on Advent or a gospel or topical again, but we play that by ear according to what the church needs. Outside of that, your location pastors determines what you do, but we come together on this. We believe that where there's unity, God commands a blessing. And so particularly as we look at things that Jesus did, things that Jesus said, we believe that God will command the blessing there as well. We're up to the third one. There's 9 of these, so we've only got another 6 years to go after this to get through it. It's going to be great. We do Sabbath was our first one, then we did prayer, and now thirdly, we're doing fasting. And it's amazing, this one, because it's coinciding with our 21 days of prayer and fasting, which kicks off today. But when we look at this, we need to remember that it's looking at fasting as a practice. So while we're doing our 21 days of prayer and fasting as a church, we'll also be looking at fasting as a practice to be incorporated into our whole lives. When we did prayer as a practice, we didn't pray for 21 days and then never pray again. We saw how we needed to incorporate that into our whole life. And that's what this study, this fasting practice will do as well. How do we incorporate fasting into the rest of our lives? How do we integrate it into all of our life? So firstly, let's just recap what we learnt. Firstly, we learned about Sabbath. In year 1, we learnt about Sabbath and learnt that it is rest for the soul as resistance and reorientation. Here's the thing, we wake up every day driven by desire, both positive desires and negative desires, desire to succeed, desire to produce, desire to provide, desire to create, desire for our appetites, desire for each other, desire for relationships, desire to serve God, to love people. We're driven by desires. And they might be good or they might be bad desires, but our desires can become an engine of exhaustion. And Sabbath interrupts that engine. We learnt that Sabbath is not merely a day off. It's a deliberate act of resistance against the lie that we are what we produce. It's the weekly declaration that God is God and we are not. From the beginning of Scripture, Sabbath is woven into the fabric of even creation. Before sin enters the story, before anxiety enters the story, before hurry enters the story, God rests. Not because he's anxious and burnt out, but because he's celebrating what has just happened. He works 6 days and then stops. He's not tired, he's delighting. He's not collapsing, he's celebrating. And so in a culture that's addicted to speed, productivity, endless input, Sabbath becomes radical. It confronts the drivenness that can quietly erode our souls. We live in a world that it always expands to fill every gap that we have. Technology ensures that we're always connected and never unreachable. Even ministry, especially ministry, can drift into overwork that's justified by good intentions. But Sabbath, it stands as a boundary. It reminds us that the world keeps spinning without our constant management. Fancy that. It reteaches our bodies that we're creatures. It trains our nervous systems to settle, and it restores our capacity for joy. I was having a conversation with Lisa Fulton and Nat Urquhart, and Lisa was telling us about our parasympathetic nervous system. Lisa, I apologise in advance for my rendering of this story. any doctor in the room. I apologise in advance for my rendering of this explanation. But Lisa was telling us about that our nervous system is fight or flight, freeze, all those things, all our reactionary things. And our parasympathetic nervous system is rest, restore, reset. But we're constantly, in the culture that we live in, we stay in this place of fight or flight, that our nervous system stays on high alert, and we seldom go into that place of rest and restore. It's because we're perennially connected. We're constantly amped up. We never come to that place. We've got electricity. Before lights went out, you had to rest. But now we can stay alert all the time. And so our bodies never quite recover. The biblical vision of Sabbath can be captured in 4 words. Stop. Stop. Rest. Delight and worship. Stop. Cease from work, from productivity, from striving. And not just paid work, but that unpaid mental work. The planning, the strategizing, the solving, the stuff that's just on our mind all the time. We rest from that. We delight, we intentionally enjoy God's good gifts, creation, food, relationships, beauty. John Mark Comer said sex a lot. I went to delight. We've got to rest. We allow our body and soul to recover. We sleep, we have slow meals, we walk, we laugh, we delight, we worship, we recenter our lives on God. We remember who He is and who we are. Sabbath exposes our illusions of control. It confronts our fear that if we stop, that everything's going to fall apart. It reveals the anxiety beneath our busyness. But it also does something deeper. It heals. Many leaders, parents, high-capacity people live in a chronic state of low-grade urgency. We might not call it stress, but our souls feel thin. Sabbath reweaves and heals what hurry has ripped away from us. It becomes a weekly rhythm of trust. I can stop because God, you're in control. When we Sabbath, we practice dependence. We declare with our bodies that provision comes from God, not from our relentless effort. We practice receiving instead of achieving. And here's why this matters as we approach fasting. Sabbath and fasting both confront our desires, but in different ways. Sabbath teaches us to rest from work, and fasting will teach us to rest from consumption. Sabbath retrains our time, and fasting retrains our appetites. Sabbath says you are not what you produce, and fasting says you're not ruled by what you crave. Now, before we fast, we have to remember that the goal is not intensity. Pentecostals in the room, the goal is not intensity. It's not this, I'm going to fast, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to strive, and I'm going to get more intense, I'm going to get more power. The goal is not intensity, it's intimacy. Sabbath guards us from turning fasting into another performance metric of our Christian walk. It reminds us that the spiritual life is not about proving devotion, but about being with God. If Sabbath is a weekly rehearsal of trust, then fasting is a focused rehearsal of release and surrender. I want this, but God, I want you more. Sabbath slows us down enough to hear the deeper currents of our heart. It surfaces what drives us, it exposes our attachments, and it restores our joy in simple things. And from that place of rest, we're ready to offer ourselves more fully to God. Now, I want to reiterate from the book of Hebrews, which you would no doubt remember clearly from my message 3 years ago, that in the book of Hebrews it says that the Sabbath rest is for the people of God. That's the Sabbath rest. It's not a day off. It's not resting one day a week. It's not even the rhythm of Sabbath. It is a lifestyle of Sabbath. In fact, our Sabbath rest is actually Jesus. He has completed the finished work of salvation. Currently, right now, Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father. Why? Because the work is done. It is finished. That's the Sabbath rest we live in. That's the true Sabbath rest where we say, I am saved and there's nothing else I can do. I gave my heart to Jesus, but He did all the work. He did all the work. He has achieved salvation for me. I live in that Sabbath rest. So we don't profess that it's all on Him and then get into this spiral in our salvation of work and fail and guilt and shame like it's all on us. No, it is all on him. He has completed the work of salvation. What freedom it is to know that Jesus is sat down at the right hand of the Father, and now we don't work for our salvation, we just work out our salvation. We're just outworking what he has already done for us. We rest in the knowledge that it is full and complete and there's nothing more we can do. But then we operate out of that. Sabbath then, as it relates to a practice, is just wisdom. It's just a weekly reminder that our rest comes from the Lord, that we're not in control of everything, that our trust is in him. So then prayer. We learnt and talked about the fact that it's talking with, listening to, and being with God. Prayer begins with this simple revolutionary idea that God is personal. Prayer for so many of us has become a ritual, a practice that is religious, a rote exercise. I was talking to a young fella here in Port Macquarie who got saved just a few weeks ago. And we were talking, he's been waking up in the middle of the night. We're talking about the different things that it might be. And I said, well, you know what? A young guy in the Bible got woken up in the middle of the night because God wanted to talk to him. Maybe God wants to talk to you. And maybe what you need to do is talk to God. And he said, how do I talk to God? I said, well, just like you're talking to me now. And he said, is that what prayer is? I said, 100%. He had this picture in his mind that prayer had to be this particular way that you talk to God, not just that you could speak to God out loud. Prayer shows us that God is personal. It's not a distant force. He's not an abstract principle. He's not an impersonal energy. He's our Father. When the disciples came to Jesus and said, Jesus, would you teach us to pray like you do? He didn't start with a technique or a posture. He started with a relationship and said, our Father, our Father. Prayer is not primarily about getting things from God. It's about being with God. Many of us approach prayer as a task, a discipline to master, a spiritual obligation to maintain. But at its core, prayer is relational presence. It's conversation. It's communion. To pray is to talk to God, honestly, openly, sometimes clumsily. Tony Edwards is law around the Chapel Collective. He's gone down in legendary history because I can't talk about prayer without mentioning him. I grew up in a church where when the song finished, silence, making room for there to be a tongues message and interpretation or a prophetic word or someone to pray out loud. And so someone who was articulate would begin to pray, and then the next person would begin to pray, and Tony Edwards would speak up and say, God, me and the wife aren't going to make it unless you come through. End of prayer. God, I'm going to knock the boss's head off if you don't stop me. End of prayer. And everyone in the room would breathe a sigh of relief, and it was like a cool breeze had just rushed through the building because there was this authenticity and rawness before God, and that is simply what God wants from us, his kids, to be open and honest with him. Just tell me how it is. Stop the special language. Stop the whatever you think you've got to do to perform in front of me, and just be with me. And it's asking for daily bread. It's confessing sin. God, I stuffed up again. It's forgiving others. It's aligning our hearts with his kingdom. But prayer is not only us talking, it's listening. Jesus describes himself as the good shepherd whose sheep know his voice. Prayer involves learning to recognize that voice, not necessarily as an audible sound, though some people do get that. And yes, I'm borderline jealous of you, but that's not good. So I'm just celebrating you. But as a gentle prompting, conviction, comfort, clarity of the Spirit. Sometimes sounds very much like us, but it's a thought that we'd never normally have. Listening requires stillness, it requires space, and it requires attention. In a world that's saturated with noise, silence can feel uncomfortable. Am I right? Yet silence isn't emptiness, it's availability. It's a posture that says, speak, Lord, I'm listening. So prayer's talking to God, prayer's listening, but prayer's also about being with God because prayer transforms us. Paul writes about beholding the Lord and being transformed into his image. As we turn our attention toward God, something subtle but profound happens. We become like the one we gaze upon. It can only be God. Prayer shapes our desires. When we begin, and this is okay because we're beginning, we often bring a long list of wants. over time, as we sit with God, our wants begin to shift. We begin to desire his kingdom more than our comfort. That can only be God. We begin to hunger for righteousness more than recognition. That can only be God. Our inner world starts to slowly align with heaven's reality. If you're like, not me, Brian, I don't think. I just hang around for another 10 years. You'll see it start to happen. Prayer shapes our desires. And that's critical as we begin to fast. Prayer, absent from fasting, fasting without prayer is just dieting. You can get more books about fasting for health than you can spiritual books on fasting. It's all the rage, fasting for health. But fasting with prayer is devotion. Fasting creates space and prayer fills it. When we abstain from food or another good gift, we feel the ache of desire more acutely. It's just how it works. And then that ache becomes an invitation. Instead of immediately satisfying it with what we're used to going to, we redirect it and we turn hunger into prayer. Every rumble becomes a reminder, God, I need you. Every craving becomes a cue, your kingdom come. Prayer gives fasting direction. It prevents it from being self-focused or performance-driven, or I wonder if I've slipped into ketosis yet. I wonder if my body's in autography yet. Autography? Pretty sure that's not the right word. Doctors, stand up and say the word right now. It reorients the discomfort toward communion. And prayer reminds us that transformation is God's work, not ours. Now, we don't fast to twist God's arm. This is not a hunger strike where you're saying, give me what I want, God, or I'm not coming back. But that's not what we're doing. And I've got to be honest, as a pastor, so many times I've heard people say, I even fasted for that, and God didn't come through. As though you've just done the very best you can for God, and so God should have. It was on God, and now God's let you down. I just want to help us around that kind of thinking this morning. We don't fast to twist his arm. We don't pray to impress him. We come to be with him. In prayer, we learn dependence. In listening, we cultivate sensitivity, and in being with God, we're gradually changed. As we step into fasting, we don't do so from striving, we do it from relationship. Sabbath has reminded us that we're not what we produce. Prayer reminds us that we're beloved children before we're servants. And fasting then becomes an offering, not to earn love, but a response to the love that has been so lavishly put upon us. We slow down, we listen, we speak honestly, we surrender our appetites, and in doing so, we make room for a deeper hunger, a hunger for God himself. So, as I said, we'll be looking at this from the perspective of it becoming a practice, a way of life. When the disciples were kind of being ripped into about the fact that they weren't fasting, Jesus said, well, they're not going to fast while the bridegroom's with them. It's when the bridegroom leaves that they'll fast, indicating that when Jesus was no longer here, his disciples were meant to be fasting. In the Sermon on the Mount, he said, when you fast. And so he wasn't instituting a new reality where there is no more fasting. He was saying, when you fast, and when the bridegroom goes, you'll be fasting. And so many people have said, well, that just means between, when he died and when the Holy Spirit came, they fasted in that period and now it's no longer necessary. But then thousands of years of Christian witness and history had Christians fasting Wednesdays and Fridays every single week until sundown. Why? Because they recognized that fasting was important. It's just Western Christianity that says, we don't need that anymore. We're amazing. All streams of Christianity across the church in other parts of the world are still fasting, and we're over here definitely not fasting. The disciples did twice a week for thousands of years. And John Mark Comer talks about how the fact that Mondays eat like a normal person, Tuesdays eat like a normal person, Wednesday fast till sundown, Thursday eat like a normal person, Friday fast till sundown, Saturday is Sabbath, and Sunday's the day of the Lord, so Saturday and Sunday you feast. Now, that's just what Christians have been doing for thousands of years. You don't have to do that at all if you don't want to. In fact, there's no commandment to fast. It's just something that Jesus did. It's something that he talked about, and it's something that he invites us to. Now, we're going 21 days of prayer and fasting. Fasting at its simplest level is simply not eating. Now, if you've been around the chapel for a while, you will hear different things about our 21 days of prayer and fasting, how what you can give up in place of food. But I do just want to mention that fasting does mean no food. If I've got to get an operation soon. If I go there, they tell me to fast for 24 hours and I get into the pre-surgery and they say, are you in a fasted state? And I'll say, yes. I have not looked at TikTok for 24 hours. I'm ready to go. They'll be like, that's not fasting. So it's not judgment. We actually totally affirm this kind of Lentish situation where you give up something, where you decrease something to let God increase in your life. If that is social media, if that is screen time, if that is online shopping, if that is, whatever it might be, we totally affirm that as a great thing to do for this 21 days. But if you want to get involved in fasting, that would mean going without food. But we just want to make it clear that if there's any health concern, then this is not for you, and that's okay. The last thing that should happen during fasting is me comparing myself to someone else and saying, look at what they're doing, I'm not good enough. No. Fasting, 21 days of prayer and fasting for the Chapel Collective is where we say, God, what would you have me do? I do not want to look to the left or to the right. I want to do and carry out what you ask me to do. And I would encourage you that when you feel like you've received something, to take it to someone in your life who is discerning, who loves you, who knows you, who loves God and knows God. I had our location pastors do this. We all sat together in a meeting and talked about what we believe God was leading us into in this 21 days. And I asked Pastor Christelle, I said, Pastor Christelle, I trust your discernment. Will you feed back to everyone about their fast, whether you think that they're doing the right thing? It was a beautiful time of grace and sharing and input. And so I encourage you to do that. Find someone that loves you and loves God. I want to encourage you that if you in any way struggle with an eating disorder, that this is not the time for you to give up food. That there's another thing that God would lead you into, another fast that God would lead you into in terms of what you might let go of. And the thing is about food, and I just want to encourage you, if that's you and you're struggling with that at the moment, our world's messed up as it relates to food. Let's not forget that the very first temptation that the enemy said to humans was around food. And it was like this thing that was not good for them, but was desirable and looked beautiful and good to eat, that they wanted to take hold of. It happened later with Jacob and Esau, where Esau was so hungry that he gave away the greater thing for what was right in front of him. It later happened in the wilderness, where they whinged and complained about the food that they were receiving. They didn't want to trust God's provision. Our world as it relates to food is messed up. Let's just acknowledge that if that's your struggle, you're living in a world that is messed up as it relates to food. And so I want to encourage you that there is freedom, and Jesus won that freedom for us. Not only did he, in the wilderness, conquer what the children of Israel managed to not be able to conquer, he conquered that. But one day, for everyone, for all of us, in any way that we struggle with food, too much, too little, whatever it looks like, that one day we're going to be presented before the Lord, perfect and complete, and we're going to have a wedding feast where there's not going to be any concern around what's on the table. I just want to encourage you with that. So if you're going to start fasting, take the rest of the day to consider how you'll fast if you haven't already. If you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't been to church for 3 weeks and all of a sudden we're talking about fasting and I'm not prepared, I'm not mentally prepared. Take the rest of the day and ask God and have a think about what you might do. Start tomorrow. Submit it to someone who loves you, like I said. Plan for it. If you have a marathon at the end of next week, don't fast during this time. Have a think about when it would be a good time. Don't be like Bron. Turn to the person next to you and say, don't be like Bron. This is how I started my fast. I knew I was going to be away during this time. I started a couple of weeks ago. And the day before, I decided it would be a good idea to eat everything that I was going to be foregoing for the next 21 days, I thought. I did not slow down on my coffee consumption and started cold turkey with no coffee on day one. I didn't eat until sundown, which was the plan, just had water, and got to church that night. I started on a Sunday. What pastor starts on a Sunday? Oh, like many of you today. Cool. But I started and I got to church, and let me tell you, I was just hangry. I was just hangry at everyone in the room. I looked around me and I looked at everyone and I thought, where are all these people from? I can't possibly love them. That was the start of my fast. And then, moving through the week, I had all the coffee withdrawals and aches and pains. And then it got to Thursday where all the coffee withdrawals should have been done with. And then all of a sudden just had full body aches. Everything was aching. I could barely sit. I could not stand. Lying down was difficult. I was simply dehydrated and everything had just come out, all the toxins. And so I encourage you, make sure you drink lots and lots and lots of water. If you think you drink a lot of water, drink more. Drink some bone broth or whatever it might be. Take some vitamins. Talk to someone who knows what they're doing in order to do this well and safely. Also, what is it you want? Consider, what is it you want? What are you fasting for? Is it for deliverance or breakthrough? Is it for direction? Is it for devotion? Think about how you're going to incorporate prayer into this time. John Piper says this. He said, prayer is not a wartime. He said, prayer is a wartime walkie-talkie. It's not an intercom to your butler. It's to give you the power to do the hard things. So let's remember that as we pray and as we fast, it's not so that you get what you want to live a life of comfort or whatever it might be. It's not an intercom to your butler. It's a wartime walkie-talkie. It's like, God, I've got these hard things to do. I need your help with it. I need your breakthrough with it. I need your deliverance in the midst of it. And let's go for it. Let's remember that the prayer that Jesus taught them to pray was, hallowed be your name. That the whole point of all of this life is for his glory and for people's good, not for our comfort. You want to pray like everybody else? Just bring your shopping list. That's how everybody prays, whether they know Jesus or not. But for those of us who know Jesus, should be like, Jesus, what I want more than anything, I want to know you. I want intimacy with you, Jesus. I want the things that are clouding my vision of you to be removed from my eyes. And you already have all of Jesus. You already have all of Jesus. But you'll see him so much more clearly that you feel like you've got more of him. He's always the goal. He's always the reward. Let's consider our fast today.